So we're now going to go ahead and look at 1.4. We're going to look at question number 4. And again, you can always go online in Canvas and look at the notes and the video links as well. So if you ever need to go back and review things, it's always there for you. So question number 4, what we're looking at is we're looking at these fractions. And we've got to, in this case, add them together. Now, a quick review of fractions. Whenever we add or subtract fractions, remember we have to get a least common denominator, right? Okay. Do we have to do that when we're multiplying? No. Now, are we multiplying here? No. How do I know if I'm multiplying? If I'm multiplying, I've got parentheses around the fractions, or multiplication dot. And we don't have that, so we're adding these together. And we need a least common denominator of 4 and 12. Well, that's easy enough because when we look at our larger number 12, well, 12 evenly divides by 4. So our least common denominator is going to be 12. So we've got that. Now we need to make sure we get common denominators. So we're now going to go ahead and multiply that 3/4 by 3 over 3. And now we are left with minus 5/12 plus 9/12. And what are we now going to do? Add them together. They have the same common denominator of a 12. So the 12 is going to go below. And now we can just simply combine them together. So we've got negative 5 plus 9. 9 is the larger number. 9 is positive. So that means my sign is going to be positive. And 9 minus 5 is a 4. And we need to see if we can reduce. So always reduce down if you can. 4 12s will reduce down because they both have a 4 in common. That's going to reduce down then to 1/3. Right, so your answer there should be 1/3. Is everyone all right with how I did that? So we went through the steps. We got our common denominators. Okay, then we got to our final answer. Always make sure that you can't reduce them down. These both had a 4 in common. So we reduced them both by a factor of 4. And that gave me then my 1/3 here. And the more of these fractions that we do, the easier they will become. So we're going to do a lot of these, and you'll get used to them. And then it'll be much easier for the next course and the later parts of this class as well. So that was question 4. The next one that we asked about out of 1/4 was question 10. Okay. Now, in order to add -8 and -4, I should begin by finding the blank of the blank. Okay? Well, when we look at a -8 and a -4. Now, how do I approach this? Well, what's my answer going to be? If I look at -8 minus 4. -8 minus 4, those go together, and that makes it what? -12. Now, what are we doing with the 8 and the 4? 8 plus 4 gives you what? 12, right? And the sign was negative. Why? Because these are what? Both negative. So in order to add these together, what did we do? These were the same sign, so we begin by finding the sum of the absolute value. They use absolute value in the textbook. I don't really talk about it too much, but that's what we're doing, and then our sign would be negative. So these are the same, so we're going to find the sum. This is what I'm wanting here. The textbook explains it a little bit too, but since these are the same, we're going to find the sum of the absolute value. They approach things a little bit differently, but the sum comes from the fact that these are the same signs. If they were different signs, then we would be looking at the difference. But since these are both negative, they're going to go together to give you that 12. And remember how we do it is we know our sign's negative, so we look at 8 plus 4, right? And that's the absolute value when we look at that. And that one was just kind of a terminology concept question. So all I wanted on 10 was the sum of the absolute values. Next, we asked about question 13. Now, this is a fraction question, and we've got some extra signs that we need to get rid of first. Okay, so what are we doing in this question? We're combining these fractions together. Now, we have some parentheses. Okay, the parentheses tell us we've got multiplication. So what do we see that's multiplying here? Well, the multiplication is here because of the double negative, right? That's our multiplication. So having those extra signs, that double negative, that's going to make it a negative times a negative, which makes it a positive. So now that multiplication with the double negative becomes an addition. So now we're left with a minus 3/4, okay, plus 5/8. Is everyone okay with how I got the double signs to cancel out? We're again adding these together. So we need a least common denominator. And the least common denominator of 4 and 8 would be 8. Because 8 goes into both of them. And now we'll, and I marked you off as being here, Emilio. So
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So what we're going to do now is our least common denominator is 8. So we use a 2 over 2 here. And that makes it then a minus 6/8 plus 5/8. Now again, signs are different. Common denominator is an 8. Which one's bigger, 6 or 5? 6 is bigger. What's the sign of the 6? Negative. And 6 minus 5 is a 1. Sign's negative. So my answer there would be a minus 1/8. Right? Because we looked at the difference, just like we did when we talked about the absolute values a minute ago. Why do we use the difference between these? Because one is positive, one is what? Negative. $17. Now, when we look at 17, we've got to make sure we get the signs correct on all the different components of this question. Whenever we have an application, we're going to read it through once, and then we'll go back and we'll do it sentence for sentence or fragment for fragment, just to make sure we can break it down and understand what we're trying to find. So let's read through it once. So the stock market gained 49 points on Tuesday and lost 28 points on Wednesday. Find the difference between these changes. So we're going to be subtracting. We want to know the difference between them, the highs and lows. How much was a total change? So what do we have first? Stock market gained 49 points. So that's going to make that a positive 49. So there's that piece there. So that's our 49. And then it lost 29 points on Wednesday. Now, what are we trying to find? We are not adding these together. What does it want you to do? If we read it, it says find the difference between these two changes. So that means we're going to make the difference between them. Put the extra negative here. Now, they want you to find the difference between them. And when we have a double negative, that's going to make that then a what? Positive. And then we've got 49 plus 29. And we'll go ahead and add those together. And that's going to make it what? 88, isn't it? Let's double check and make sure, because we've got 49 and 29. Yep, sorry, 78, not 88. So that gives us 78 for the difference. And that's just how far apart they are. And that's what you're wanting to find. You're wanting to find the spread from the high to the low. So there's a 78-point spread there, 78-point difference between the two. So does that one make more sense now? Because they want you to subtract them because it has the difference. But then that makes the double negative because they want to know how far it is from the high to the low. And we could label that points as well. 19 and 20, we're going to have to be very careful with the signs. So when we look at 19 and 20, we're going to have to read it through. We may have to draw a diagram, especially for 19, to understand what is really happening. 19 is a little bit trickier because there's a lot of things going on. We've got to read question 19 and then try to understand how everything relates. So we're going to read question 19. Then we'll go back and try to pick out the different pieces and components. So the ocean surface is at 0. Okay, so we're going to call that sea level 0. A diver is underwater at an elevation of minus 132 feet near a rock formation. In this area, the ocean floor has an elevation of minus 297 feet. The rock formation rises to a peak 194 feet above the ocean floor. How many feet below the top of the rock formation is the diver? So we need to first think about the diver, then we'll look at the rock formation, and then we'll try to answer the question. So we're going to have to draw a diagram here to help us see what's really happening. So let's start with the diver here. And sometimes it does help to draw a quick diagram. So what we've got is we've got the water here. And this water is going to be at 0. And then we've got a diver. And he's going to be down here. And stick figures will work for this if you want. Not that great of an artist, so these will work fine. And we've got this diver. And he's down here at minus 132 feet. Is everyone okay with that so far? Now, then we've got the ocean floor down here. And the ocean floor down here is at minus 297. So that's what we've got so far. Okay, so we've got the ocean here. We've got a diver going down 132 feet. And then we've got the bottom of the ocean here. Now, at the bottom of this ocean, there is going to be a rock formation that's going to come up 194 feet. So we've got a rock formation here that's going to come up 194 feet. So we have to be very careful about how this is labeled. So this is where it gets confusing. So this is going to go up 194 feet from the bottom. So where is it actually at? If I look at a number, well, it's below 0, right? Because it's in the water. I need to figure out the difference between these two. So let's try to figure out where this is at. So we've got minus 297 feet. We're going to add 194 feet to that. That's going to tell us where this is at. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We know our answer is going to be negative because minus 297 is the larger number. And so we'll just add these, subtract these together from each other. So 297, we're going to subtract that 194. It gives me a difference of 103. So that's at 103. So is everyone okay with how I got to this point? So here's the 0. Here's my water. Here's the bottom of the ocean. We've got this rock that's coming up from the bottom of the ocean, and it goes up 194 feet. So that means that this is actually at minus 103. We've got it all drawn out. Now we just need to figure out our difference. Okay, so I want to know how many feet below the top of the rock formation is the diver. So I'm going to have to subtract these two. So I want to know what's the difference in height between this diver and this rock. So we want to know how many feet lower is the diver. So what we can do is we can just subtract those. So we've got a minus 103. That's the height of that rock. We're going to subtract off the height of the diver, which is a minus 132. We know the double negative is going to make that then positive. And so now we've got a minus 103 plus 132. And we can add those together. Subtract them from each other because these are different signs. Larger sign's positive. So we've got 132 minus 103. That's going to give you a difference of 29 feet. So it's 29 feet below. And I would have took a negative 29 feet as well. Either way, you just want to see what the difference between them is. So I would have also taken a negative 29 feet. I just chose to keep it positive and just label it as below. So that diver is 29 feet below the rock formation. But that one was a tricky one because we really need to think about what we've got. So we have the water at 0. Diver went down 132 feet. Bottom of the ocean floor is way down here at minus 297. Rock formation came up 194 feet. So that means the rock formation is 103 feet below the water. We want to figure out how much lower the diver is. So I just subtracted the 2, and I got 29 feet below. So that diver is 29 feet below the rock formation. And again, I also would have taken a negative 29 feet. As long as you either label it or use the negative symbol. Either one, just so you know it's below. That was question 19. Question 20 is similar but a little bit different. I think 20 is a little bit easier. And again, the way we handle these applications is we read them. And we go back and we look at each piece. And we try to figure out what needs to go where. So Nikki is fishing from a bank 10 feet above the water. In this location, the fish tend to feed 31 feet below the surface. How long must Nikki's fish line be to reach the fish? So we need to figure out how much line she's going to actually need. So let's draw a picture so we can kind of see what's happening here. So we've got Nikki and she's up here. Okay, she's on the surface of the water. And the water's down here, 10 feet below that. And then in the water, we've got the fish. So we've got the fish swimming here. And that is an additional 31 feet below. So this is at minus 31. We'll call this at 0. And she's at 10. So I need to figure out how much line I need. Now, hopefully you can kind of look at it and think, all right, well, if this is 31 feet, then I've got to add 10 more feet to make it then what? 41, right? Because I need 41 feet of line, 10 here and 10 here. Well, how would I do that? I would just do that by finding the difference. So I've got 10 feet down to the water. I've got to find the difference between the water and the fish below it. And the double negative is going to make that then a what? Positive. Adding those together, I then get my 41 feet of line. But you could have either subtracted them and used that double negative, or drew your picture and just kind of looked at it and saw the difference there. Because you want to find the difference between where she's at and where the fish are. And that's going to be a difference of 41 feet. So she's going to have at least that 41 feet of line to catch her fish. Is everyone okay with that? And sometimes we do draw diagrams. Diagrams make it easier. If I didn't draw a diagram, it would look confusing. We wouldn't know what we're doing, but just by doing a simple little stick figure diagram, it lets you see visually what's happening. And we can see here we are, fish are below there, and you can just look at it without even doing any math to know I'm going to have to add them together to get that 41 feet. Okay? Are there any others out of 1-4? Before we move on to 1-5. Any other questions out of 1-4? And again, if you need me to further explain something, just be sure and ask. Because if you're not completely understanding something, say something. So I can always stop. I can explain things many different ways. So don't ever hesitate to ask questions. If I'm going through something too quickly, make sure you say something. That way I can slow down and we can look at specifically what you're not understanding. 1-5, we're going to look at question 2. So 1-5, we're going to look at question number 2. And we've got this. We've got 5x minus 3y. And we want x and y to both be negative. Okay, and we want to see what the result's going to be. Now, we're not just going to try one set of numbers. We're going to try a couple of sets to see what's going to happen. So we're going to plug in some numbers, and we're going to see what the results are. So let's start by using, how about they have to both be negative. How about x is minus 3 and y, and you can use any numbers that you want, is negative 10. I'm just going to make x a little bit bigger than y. So in this case, the x is the bigger number. Negative 3 is bigger than negative 10. I'm going to plug them in, and I'm going to see my result. See if it's positive or see if it's negative. Plug my values in here. And we're going to examine then the result. So if I plug those values in, 5 times negative 3, that makes it a negative 15. Remember, this is a multiplication here. Negative and negative makes it a positive 30. And when I put these together, then what do I get? Minus 15 plus 30. I get a 15. And it comes out to be positive, right? Okay. Now, we can't just make the assumption with just one set of numbers, that it's always going to be positive. So let's try switching them around. So that was when x was negative 3, y was negative 10. Now let's try x is negative 10, y is going to be the negative 3. And let's see if we get the same result or we get a different result. Let's plug the numbers in and see what we get. And this is all relating back to question 2. So I'm going to plug my values in. And we'll work it out. So 5 times a negative 10 is a negative 50. Negative and negative makes that then a positive 9. And look at the signs here. Well, this one, it comes out to be a negative 1. Or not 49, a negative 41, my mistake. As long as I can put those together correctly. So look at the difference here. I worked it out with 2 different sets of numbers. I just switched the order around. Okay, both of these were negative, like the directions say. Okay, what happened to my signs? Is it always positive? No. Is it always negative? No, it can be both of them, right? Depending upon the order, which one's bigger is going to tell you what the sign's going to be. Okay, because it controls it. So all I want you to see here is it says if x and y are both replaced with negative numbers, is this value positive or negative? Well, it can be either one. It can be both, right? Sometimes positive, sometimes negative. And what controls it? Well, what controls it is whichever one's the larger number. Because all these signs change here. So that's going to tell you whether it's going to be positive or whether it's going to be negative. And it can be either one, depending upon the order and which one's larger, whether x is larger or y is larger. So that's what I want you to see. It's not always the same. It switches around, depending upon the signs. Because you've got the double negative here, so that's what changed it all. If that would have been a positive, it would be always negative. But it's not, because this sign here switches them around. So that was question number 2. Does everyone kind of see what? Because that double negative here, see with that 3, that switches the signs around for the second half. Question 3. What we've got for question 3 is we've got negative, parentheses, a minus b. And we want this to be negative. And these are thinking questions. They make you think about how numbers relate to each other. Now, if I want this to be a negative final result, how could I get this to be a negative final result? Well, if I want this to be a negative value at the end, if this part was positive, a positive from here times the negative out in front would make it then what? Negative. So that tells me if I want my overall answer to be negative, that tells me then that the inside has to be what? Positive, right? Because if the inside is positive, that negative out in front is going to make my answer then what? Negative, right? So when I look at this, I know I need to make sure that the inside's positive. So the inside has to be positive. Now, how can that happen? How can I make sure that the inside is positive? Well, let's pick some values for A and B. And let's see what kind of results we get. So we're just going to work with A minus B. And I'm going to use A is 5, and let's say b is 9. And if I plug in a is 5 and b is 9, then I get a minus 9, 5 minus 9, which is a negative 4. And that's not what I want, right? And we're going to talk about what would make it true and what would make it false. I don't want this. I don't want a negative 4. I want that inside to be a positive 4. That way, when I switch my signs here, it becomes what I need. So the inside has to be positive. Now, if I use a is 5 and b is 9, it's not going to work for us. But what's going to happen if I switch them around? What's going to happen if I make a 9 and b 5? Well, if I switch them around, then what does that do? Well, if I switch them around, that's 9 minus 5, which that makes it a 4. And that is what I want. I want positive values. Okay, so does everyone see? This is what I want. Now, let's look at what happens here. What happens with this one? We've got 5 for A, 9 for B. Well, in this case, B is the larger number, right? So B is the larger number, and it came out to be what? Negative. We didn't want that. Look at this one. In this case, what happened here? A was the larger number, right? And that made that then what? Positive, which is what we want, because the negative will switch the signs at the end. So what do we need to know now? How do we make sure that stays positive? Well, to make sure it stays positive, A must be larger than B. So that's going to be your answer there. A needs to be larger than B. That way it's positive, and at the end, when you switch your signs, it becomes negative, which is what I want. So the answer that I was looking for there is going to be A bigger than B. As long as A is larger than B, it's going to make that value negative at the end, which is what we want. We'll go ahead and work through a few more of these. And once we've answered the questions, then we'll take a short break, come back, and start the next section. So let's work out a few more of these out of 1-5. We also asked about question 7. So for question 7, we've got negative 5/9. Divide that by negative 6 over 13. Okay, so this is again a question over fractions, and this is a very easy question, but we need to remember how we handle division in fractions. So when we have division in fractions, we can't really work with the division itself. So what we do is we take this division symbol here, and we need to make that multiplication. And how do we make that multiplication? Well, we can turn division into multiplication by using the reciprocal. So the first fraction always stays the same. So that minus 5/9 stays the same. Because this division here needs to turn into multiplication, I'm going to use my reciprocal. Okay, and what's the reciprocal of this minus 6 over 13? Well, the reciprocal of that minus 6 over 13 would be a minus 13 over 6. And you can keep the negative on the top. Now, we have now turned this into multiplication. And we can work with multiplication. We can't do division. So whenever you have division of fractions, you flip the second fraction over. So that's our rules. Flip that second fraction over. Do not try to cross cancel here. You do not do that until the very end. So do not try and cancel out that 6 and 9. Because you can't, because we have to flip them over first. Now we can go ahead and finish this out. Nothing cancels, so we just multiply across. We know the double negative is going to make that positive. So let's go through now and multiply out our answer. So we've got 5 times our 13 in the numerator. And that's going to be 65 on the top. And then we've got 9 times your 6 here. That's going to be your 54. And that's going to be your final answer, which is 65 over 54. So I flipped it over. Double negative makes that then what? Positive. And it's more important that you know how to do this question than some of the others, because we do a lot with fractions. And so this is something we're going to use a lot. Whenever you divide, you flip the second fraction over and multiply. But do not cancel out first. Do not cancel first. You have to flip it over first. Otherwise, you'll get the wrong answer. So take your reciprocal of the second part only, and then just multiply across. We've got 3 more, so we'll look at question 13 next. And question 13, we need to evaluate this expression. And this is a very important one with order of operations. So we're going to go through this one slowly to make sure we understand what happens to all the numbers. If we have double negatives, they'll make it positive. So we have this to work with at the very beginning. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go ahead and plug our values in. Then we'll work each piece individually and then put them all together. So let's plug in our values. Make sure we copy them down correctly. So we'll go ahead and plug them in. Now, whenever I plug in a negative value, I've got to use parentheses. So that A was a -4. So notice I put the parentheses around it here. That way we don't make a mistake and forget that's multiplication. Or try to add them together. They're not. They're multiplied together. And then we've got a -9 times a -2. And then we have a -3 times a +3. And you could use square brackets if you would like. Since we've got all these parentheses, I'm just going to use the double parentheses, and that's fine too. Okay, we're going to do the first set here first. So we're going to work from left to right. And this is the first set of parentheses. Negative and negative makes that then a positive. So the first set we would multiply. Negative and negative makes it a +16. So that set of parentheses is gone. Now we'll do the inside here. We've got a -9 times a -2. -9 times a -2, well, negative and negative makes it positive. So that's a +18. And then we've got -3. Yeah, we can close the door if we need to. If it's a little bit too noisy, we can leave it open. Doesn't matter to me. We've got -3 times +3. That makes it a -9. So I did this set completely first. Then I did the inside here, and I got to this point. So watch your order of operations. Now we've got 18 minus 9. 18 minus 9 makes it a +9. And we've got that 16. You could put parentheses around it if you want, or not, doesn't matter. And now we can go ahead and just multiply. And we've got 16 times that 9. And 16 times that 9, that makes it a +144. So let's take a moment to just review what I did. So here is my original expression. I needed to plug in these values. Whenever you plug a value in that's negative, put parentheses around it. Very, very important. Okay, so put parentheses around those negatives when you plug them in. So I put the negative 4 in for A, so I put the parentheses here. And then I did the same thing with the negative 2 and the positive 3. Then I went and I worked through. So the first set of parentheses, I can deal with it itself. Negative and negative makes it positive, so 4 and 4 makes it 16. Then I did the inside of this one next. Negative 9 times negative 2. Negative and negative makes it a positive 18. 3 times 3 makes it 9. Negative sign comes down. 18 minus 9 makes it 9. And then 16 out in front times the 9 that's left over. That gives you then that 144. Is everyone okay with how I did that? Just be very careful when you plug in values that are negative. Use parentheses. Question 14. Two-ninths of the difference between minus 6 and minus 24. So let's first focus on what we've got. 2/9, and then we've got the of. So that means multiplication. And then we've got a difference between these two numbers. So let's work with the difference first. So I'm looking at the difference between a minus 6 and a minus 24. So that's what I've got. I want the difference between them. Again, that makes that subtraction there. Double negative here is going to make that then positive. And then we've got minus 6 plus your 24. And that minus 6 plus that 24, well, that then makes it positive 18. And we also want 1/9 of this. Okay, so we did that part. We did our difference. We also want 2/9. We also want 2/9. So we want 2/9 of this. Well, how do we do 2/9 of that 18? Well, 2/9 of that 18 would be 2/9 times your 18 over 1. Okay? Because we're multiplying. Because that of, see, that means multiplication. So we did our difference first. We got the 18. And we still want 2/9 of that difference. So then we've got our 2/9 out in front. 18, we'll write that as an 18 over 1. We can go ahead and multiply, which means we can cross cancel. So that 18 and that 9, they can cancel out. And that's going to give you a 2 and a 1. And we've got 2 times 2, which makes it 4. 1 times 1, which is 1. And that then leaves me with a final answer of 4. So I found my difference first. And then I went through and I found 2/9 of that difference. That gave me the 4. We've got one more question, and then we'll take a short break. So one more question to look at. And this is going to be question 19. Let's read it and then try to identify all the different pieces. Twice the product of minus 2 and minus 3 subtracted from from 7. So we're going to subtract that from 7. So let's think about what we've got first. Twice, so that's 2, times the product of minus 2 and minus 3. So there's that. That's what we've got so far. Now, what are we going to do with that? We're going to take that away from 7. We're subtracting it from 7. Okay, so that's going to be subtracted from 7. So that means the 7's out in front, right? And we're going to subtract it off. This is being subtracted away from 7. So 7's going to go out in front, and this is behind it. Let's go ahead and work with what we've got. We'll do a multiplication first. So we can go ahead and just work with this piece here. And we'll just bring down that negative. You can do it all at once. I'm just going to bring down the negative. So let's go ahead and multiply this together. 2 times negative 2 times negative 3. Well, negative 2 and negative 3, negative and negative makes that a positive value. So that means my answer is going to be positive. And I've got 2 times 2, which is 4, times 3 makes it 12. Is everyone all right with that? So 2 times negative 2 times negative 3. Double negative makes that positive. I'm just going to bring down my negative sign. I'm subtracting them off. And now I've got 7 minus 12. Which one's larger? 12. Sign is negative. So that makes that negative. And 12 minus 7 is a 5 for the difference. So my answer here would be negative 5. So your answer for that one would be a difference of that negative 5. Let's go ahead and take a short break, and we will start back at 9:30. So take about a 10-minute break, and we'll start back here at 9:30.